what I realized was that as a leader, that was having a negative impact on them, because if I was stressed out, I was conveying that stress to them. And so at that point, it's like, well, actually, can I do my job well?
Hey, Blair, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time to do this with me. As you might have seen in the past, we do have a YouTube channel already, but it was always way more focused to people looking for work, people looking for jobs. As I do for the, let's say, candidates crowd, there's a lot of things that they don't know. But it's funny because when it comes to people hiring, there's a lot of people that are new in a role of not just hiring, building teams. Though a lot of people getting into the shoes of technical leadership and or management, and all of a sudden they come from dev backgrounds and they start leading a team of other developers, and they don't really need how to do it. They don't really know how to do it. Starts with a very, very easy one. What's your current role?
So my current role is CTO, so Chief Technology Officer at a company called Ambit AI, which does kind of customer digital employees and analytics, and we're based in Auckland, New Zealand.
What's your background? How did you get to be a CTO? How did you manage to be a CTO? What have you done in the past? What was your kind of career path to land a CTO role?
So if I kind of go back to university, I did a double major in computer science and marketing, and I always kind of thought marketing was the fun part of the double major, actually, the creative part. But actually, it turns out that's wrong, because I found computer science to be quite a creative discipline, depending on how you look at it. And so from there, left. I studied in Hamilton at Waikato Uni, and then went over to London. My goal was to not do anything IT related. I did some programming jobs when I was at university, and I was going to go work in a bar. However, I turned up in the UK, and my very first job was a software development job, which was actually pretty cool. And I had a great bunch of people. So started off as a software developer, and then did some work out in South Africa as well, working as a developer, and then ended up back in New Zealand. And I got offered, kind of progressed up as a senior dev and was having a really, really good time. Got offered a team lead role, which I thought, well, why not? Let's try this out. It'll be really cool. Got into it, loved it. And then went from there. After that, I ended up as head of engineering for a cryptocurrency bank over in Germany. And then from there, came back to New Zealand kind of during the pandemic, and ended up working as head of engineering for Ambit, and then stepping into the CTO role. So it's been a bit of a journey, actually, but yeah, very fun.
How you differentiate the role of a lead developer or team lead, head of engineering, and CTO? What would be the different layers you will find in that one?
What you tend to find, and so it's actually a very difficult question to answer, because it does depend on the organization and the size of the organization. So like I'm going to give you a very generic answer, but to a degree it does depend on the size of the organization. So for example, if you're a much smaller organization, say in the very early phases, you might have a CTO that is still very actively involved in coding, for example, very hands-on. And if I look at my experience in my previous company, when I joined, we were about 30 people, and by the time I left, we were well over 100, and engineering had gone to about 50-something, 55 people. And so it's just not possible or practical, or I'm not a good leader if I'm still hands-on in the code at that level. But if you're a startup of 5 to 10 people, then the CTO is very often involved in coding and looking at code and helping to make technical decisions. And what you tend to find is that if you're someone kind of at a senior developer or kind of a lead developer level, you tend to be focused on delivery, supporting the people around you, helping the team to follow best practice, to evolve those best practices. You're helping with hiring. When you move up to a team lead, just still very, and a lot of people only ever want to get to the team lead and not go further, because the good thing with a team lead is you get the people side of things, but you also get to stay hands-on in the code. So there's a little bit of a balance, right? Like I tend to use the split like 80-20, so 20% on average is kind of people management, and that could be the direct reports into you. It could be the employer branding stuff, so like going to conferences, for example, and representing the company, or interviewing, all of that stuff. And then the rest of it is kind of hands-on coding or to do with coding. So that's supporting the people around you, working on your development practices, writing code, helping with delivery, for example. In some companies, it's even representing engineering if you're talking with customers, for example. So our lead developers talk with customers. In fact, our developers do talk with customers. We consider that to be part of the development scope of work. And then obviously as you move up, you're kind of getting into head of and CTO. And again, like it depends on the size of the company. So what I found at Ambit in my previous company was you reach a point where your role becomes, okay, how do we scale the team? So how do we grow the team? How do we put support structures in place so everyone is well supported? How do you work a lot closer with other stakeholders to help with delivery, but also to make sure we're delivering the right things? How do you set the team up to help support themselves? So if there's a problem, that the team has got it, but they're also supported by people that can help them resolve those problems. So as we know in IT, the world is not always rosy with rainbows and unicorns, right? Things go wrong. And so it is about, as your product gets bigger and bigger and more complex, and ultimately that can happen as you bolt more features onto it. How do you make sure that when things do go wrong or there are challenges, you've got a team that can really support themselves, that can support themselves, that are well supported and have a good structure.
And Blair, if you have to say in 3, let's say, bullet points, what's your approach to building teams? What are the 3 things that you would consider when building a team? And again, I'm not just talking about bringing people on board, but I'm building a team, not just a group of people working together.
I think the big one is for me personally, don't focus too much on 100% skill match. And so I still see that a lot with hiring. I see people going to market to find someone where they've got to have 90% of the technical skills for the role. And what I tend to do is say, look, let's find the right people. So let's find people that have a positive attitude, people that like what we do and are excited about what we do. Yes, I think there is a baseline level of technical competency that they have to have, but I prioritize that attitude and that aptitude and that excitement over it. That there is a balance with that. So if you are hiring people at a very senior lead level, then you do want to make sure that they have the right technical skills to be able to support the team and the experience. But I'd say get your hiring priorities right from the beginning. So what is important to you as a company for the roles that you're hiring, and to get on the same page with everyone and to actually get the team involved. So that doesn't have to be a lead or a CTO or head of discussion, right? Or a decision. I think it's good to get the wider team involved and say, we're expanding, we're hiring, here are the roles. What are the things that are important to us when we're hiring, and to get the team involved in those discussions. But number one, sort out and get aligned on what is important for you when you're hiring. If you're talking about hiring as well, standardize your hiring process. So have a well-documented and agreed upon hiring process. So that includes, what are the interview steps? Try and keep them as lean as possible, especially in the current market. and make sure they're realistic. So, for example, if you have a coding challenge that's going to take 2 days for a candidate to complete, it's highly unlikely they're going to do it, or you're going to miss out on some really good candidates. So it is what is the minimum that we need to do in order to get confidence that we're hiring the right people, and get the team involved in that as well. But also in that process, build in your response mechanisms. So like, how do you respond to candidates? So I think there is, if you're delayed, for example, in getting back to a candidate, or if you have to defer an interview because people are off sick, there's a good way to communicate that with candidates. If you reject a candidate, there's a good way to reject a candidate, or to say, look, hey, thank you. I think that a way that you communicate with candidates is really important as well. And it's good to have that consistent and actually have that well documented, and have some SLAs for how you get back to candidates, your quality standards, but also your times as well. And I always think as well, like if you're trying to build and grow a team, make sure that you have a good structure in place for supporting them. So make sure you have the right balance of junior, intermediate, and senior. And sometimes you can end up with a little bit of an imbalance, and that's okay for a short time. But you want to make sure that you have juniors that are well supported, because I think I've had a lot of amazing experiences with junior developers, especially ones that are fresh into the industry. They're excited, they're keen to learn, and I've seen juniors come on, or we hired people in my previous company straight out of coding boot camp, and they were just enthusiastic. Yes, they didn't have a lot. They had good baseline technical skills. They didn't have a lot of industry experience, but they were super keen to learn. And if you give them the right support, within 6 to 8 months, they'll be ripping out like some really amazing stuff, some really amazing code. But it is making sure that people in the team have the right support network as well. And the other one is making sure that anyone that's got direct reports doesn't have too many direct reports. So, they're able to do a really good job of supporting the people they have. They're not stretched too thin. And that's really important as well. And again, that might be a short-term thing. So, there was one example that I had where I had 18 direct reports, and it was literally a short-term thing while we were hiring that support structure, and that's okay, as long as you've got a plan to mitigate that. But having a lead developer that's got more than 6 or 7 direct reports, you're not really setting them up for success. So want to make sure that you've got that support network and you've got that good kind of balance as well.
I can relate to everything you have said. In other areas, not software developers necessarily, but yeah, definitely giving them support, not having too many people.
Yeah, look, the one thing I would say there, right, is it is an interesting one, because companies will go through hiring phases and then they'll go through hiring freezes. And I worked for a US finance company many years ago, a Fortune 500 company with 20-something thousand employees around the world, and made lots of money. But then we always had hiring cycles and hiring freezes, and so sometimes being able to go, okay, I've got too many direct reports, or our team doesn't have the right balance, or we need to get a better support structure in place. You may not be able to do it right now, but what you can do is make a plan for it. So you can say, right, like within the next 6 to 12 months, this is where we want to get to. So it may not be possible to do it now. And I know, especially in the current market where there's been a lot of tech layoffs or hiring freezes, you may not have that right balance in your team. And that's okay if it's a short-term thing. You want to have a plan to mitigate that when hiring opens up.
Let's see if we can learn from your mistakes. Like what has been the biggest mistake you can recall in leading a team?
Probably one of the mistakes I made, and there's a couple that I'll highlight here. One of the mistakes I made very, very early on, and it was a good learning experience for me, was there's that point at which you need to start stepping away from the code. And so I remember kind of moving into, as I started moving more into people lead, I found that I was doing a really average job of everything. And so I was still actively involved in coding, and I was also trying to grow a team at the same time and lead a bunch of people. And there is a point at which you go, look, I need to, I still, yeah, I think it's still important at a team leader, an engineering manager level, a head of engineering manager, and at manager level to have an idea of what's going on in the code. But you can't be picking up features, and you can't have critical work where the team are relying on you, because you're getting pulled in a million different directions. And so there is a point at which you have to go, okay, I need to take a bit of a step back from day-to-day development. And I think one of my mistakes early on, and I see it's a very common mistake, and I see a lot of people making it, is you end up becoming a bottleneck in the code, right? So there is a point at which people are still relying on you to approve pull requests or for key technical decisions, but you're not able to get back to them in a timely manner because you're busy doing other things that are also equally as important. Likewise, if you're still you're still actively involved in approving pull requests and all of those key technical decisions at an operational level, then you're not doing the things that you need to do to get your organization or your tech practice to that next level. So it's a really interesting one. The other one is, and this is quite a fascinating one, and something that I think I pride myself on being someone that's quite calm under pressure. And so, if there's a problem, I don't tend to stress out about it. I take a step back and I look at it objectively and critically. And I find that as a leader, that's really, really important, because what you want to do is convey, like an atmosphere of, kind of calmness to the team, especially if they're under pressure, especially if there's a problem. If you've got people around you barking and crying and stressing out, you want to be the team that is kind of go, okay, cool, we acknowledge there's a problem, we acknowledge there's a production outage or a serious issue. However, we're just going to focus on solving this issue and go through a methodical investigation process and come up with a way to solve it. And as a leader, what you want to do is convey that kind of, you want to build that atmosphere of kind of calmness and that approach where this is just a logical, anytime there's a problem, you approach it in a logical way and you go through it and you try and solve it. And if you ever, as a leader, I think if you ever get to a state where you're becoming overwhelmed yourself and you're becoming stressed out and you're losing that kind of that calmness, it's probably a good idea to take a step back. And there has been one time in my career where I think there was just so much going on, I got very stressed out and I was unable to be that calm, objective point to the team. And I actually had people in my team saying, look, are you okay? This is the first time we've seen you stressed out ever. What I realized was that as a leader, that was having a negative impact on them, because if I was stressed out, I was conveying that stress to them. And so at that point, it's like, well, actually, can I do my job well? And if that happens, the recommendation I have is to take a bit of a step back and go, okay, cool. I'm going to take a day off or half a day off just to regroup my head and get back to that calm point. And it was a bit of a learning experience for me as well, because, I realized that, the moment I become stressed and frustrated and annoyed, it changes your approach to problem solving, your approach to dealing with people, and you end up conveying a lot of that frustration to your team, and your team are trying to do a really good job. They're trying to do the best they can. And so it's also not fair on them, and it doesn't help them to solve a problem or to be effective as a team if their leader is in a stressed out state. And so I would advise just people in a leadership role to look after themselves as well. Because if you're not looking after yourself, then you're not going to be able to do a good job of being that kind of calm leader for the team. And especially if there is, in a startup, especially in startups, right? you get a product to market as quickly as possible, so you can prove that product. Obviously technical debt isn't necessarily a high priority, but at some point, I think the best analogy I heard with technical debt is it's like the interest you have to pay back at some point, and that tech debt will catch up on you at some point, and you will have to pay it back. And again, it's just that when things are going wrong, you want to be that voice of reason and that calm voice that helps the team to kind of just approach it in a really calm way. Especially when you're in a company where you've got everyone else around you trying to dump a whole lot of pressure on the team. What you don't want is your technical leader also being another voice, another pressure points on the team. So I think it is important to look after yourself and to make sure that you're in a calm state as well, so that you can help the team to calmly approach things.